Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 4:00 p.m., Friday, October 9th, 2018. The Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation now convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notices were given to the media first on Monday, October 1st. Second was on Wednesday, October 3rd. And for the record, today is Tuesday, October 9th, 2018, and the time now is 4:00. The committee will hear and accept testimony, both oral and written, on the following. Bill number 352-34, as corrected by the prime sponsor, and introduced by myself. An act to amend Section 3102.3 of Chapter 3, Article 1, Title 17, Guam Code Annotated, relative to removing the 3 appointees of MAGAʹLÅHI GUÅHAN from the Guam Education Board, increasing the board members from 2 years to 4 years, and making non-voting members voting members. The conduct of this public hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying will be recognized in the order of sign-up on the sign-in sheet. Written testimony may be read. Lengthy written testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide our legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony shall be confined to the substance, which is the bill. Persons will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you are done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony. It may be desired. Okay? When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name for the record. I'd like to recognize, joining me today is Senator Will Castro. We'll now begin with testimonies from Ms. Dorothy Pokaigi. Please come forward. Or you want to give oral? No, you don't want. But you identify that you support the bill. Okay. We have Barry Mead. Mr. Mead, please come forward. And you have provided us with your written testimony. We have Mr. Robert Koss. Sir, please join us on the table. And Mr. Sid Lansangan. Sir, come forward. And we also have Mr. Mark Mendiola. Okay. I'm also joined by Senator Regine Biscu-Lee. We will begin with, it's supposed to be in the order, but we'll go ahead and we'll start with you, Mr. Mead, because you're first up on the list. Sir, just press the microphone is on. Thank you, sir.
No. Ready? Oh, okay. Put it here so I can read it. Okay, half a day and good afternoon. My name is Barry Mead. I'm a former member of the Guam Education Board. I'm the founder and past president of the Guam Community College Faculty Union and former chair of the GCC Union bargaining unit of the Guam Federation of Teachers. In that position, I also sat on the board of trustees at the Guam Community College as an advisor, not as a voting member. I also served, and I'm the former treasurer from the Guam Federation of Teachers, Local 1581 AFT. I currently hold a business license as a consultant on labor and serve as a representative of the Guam Community Faculty Union, Local 6476. I'm here today in opposition of Bill 352-34 as proposed. With respect to Title 17, Chapter 3, Article 1, specifically Section 3102.3, first and foremost is the timing of the bill, in that currently there are listed only 4 people seeking office, which would allow the governor to appoint an additional 2 members after the election. To me, this is a piecemeal legislation in that it fails to address more pressing issues with the overall title. First, the inclusion that the title needs to have an inclusion that one of the responsibilities is of the GEB does an annual, biannual review of all board policies. Currently, over 50% of all board policies are over 40 years since last reviewed. Second, need to remove the need for a petition to have one's names placed on the ballot as with the CCU. Having them be the same as a senator or anyone else, to have a petition is kind of, I don't want to use that word. I had mine ready to go. I had some signatures, and I decided not to for other reasons. But then also have the terms of the members run non-consecutively as with the CCU. We know that there are 3 seats up for election this year, and then the next election will be other seats. The other one is that the most disturbing to me is that we are reducing the overall membership of the GEB from 9 to 7 overall, and reduces the at-large elected members from 6 to 4. Speaking specifically to the students being a voting member, by doing this, following problems could or may arise. First and foremost, a student is required to be elected by the island-wide school board of governing students, where the other 2 additions are by appointments. It will allow for students to participate in the grievance process, though the GEB itself is not in the formal grievance procedures of the GEB-GFT agreement under Section 5.7. During executive session, these issues will be discussed during personnel matters. As provided for in 4 GCA Chapter 10, commonly known as PEMRA, and 5 GCA Chapter 8, the Open Government Law, Section 8111, B, notwithstanding any other provision of law, a public agency may hold executive sessions with its staff to consider matters with the scope of the Public Employee Management Relation Act. By having a student be a voting member in that meeting of that executive council or executive session, you violate PEMRA. It will then provide for a student to participate in that which they should have no interest or input. I have been told that there are parents of students that would really not like to be sued, as the board was recently in the action that they took on the superintendent. Additionally, there is no length of term or limits mentioned, and by receiving service learning credits, the question comes, will this student also be afforded the stipend that's given to all elected members? For the mayors, since we have a limited amount of time, I'll skip right to it. The concern would be, not only have I been told that mayors are not attending a lot of the meetings currently, and that the one that does has said he doesn't represent all the mayors, there is a problem. And the concern too would be that the appointee would be more apt to lobby for schools in his or her village than for the entire island, thereby not a true representative of all students and parents. 3 GCA Chapter 1, Section 1117 and 1123 identify precincts. 3 GCA Chapter 3, 3101, persons entitled to vote. And Section 3102 affects speaks to the affidavit of registration. The reason I bring this up is that you could end up having the mayor of Dededo elected by whatever the population is there compared to the mayor of Mauricio. It's an unequal balance, and it also could be construed that is in violation of the one man, one vote rule. With respect to the exclusive bargaining unit, again, 3 GCA speaks to the 2 precincts, persons entitled to vote, and speaks to the affidavit of registration. By allowing the GFT to appoint a voting member, speaks directly in opposition to these sections of law, in that the assumption is that the chair of the teachers union, in that it has the most members of the bargaining units as outlined in the law, would make this appointment. If not filled, they would fill the position themselves. Not only does this violate the one man, one vote rule, but unlike the mayors, the voters are even more restricted to only the dues-paying members of the bargaining unit. And currently, the GFT represents less than 50% of the membership of the bargaining unit. So in other words, whoever this person is that is appointed does not represent the entire teachers of the bargaining unit. So hence you could say that the majority are not being represented. Currently, I have filed an ethics complaint to the GEB. I have attached it for you to review. as a member is an elected, paid member, the treasurer. I have submitted the financial statement in addition to that, with the GEC of the Guam Federation of Teachers Executive Committee. Not only did this person vote to accept the GEB-GFT agreement, but made the motion for both votes, and in that there were only 5 members present, his vote constituted the 5th and deciding vote on both occasions. As a paid member and sitting treasurer of the Executive Council of the GFT, he would have had direct input to the acceptance of the agreement while in meetings of the GFT Executive Committee and both the Guam Education Board executive session meetings. And though the GFT may say he didn't participate, it is highly unlikely that they will produce the minutes of any meeting to corroborate that statement. Also, by allowing the bargaining unit to have a voting position would not only violate contract law, because in this case, as I just said, a person that sits on both boards voted for that contract. That is highly illegal and violates I don't know how many other Guam laws. And though not, from 4 GCA Chapter 10, but also violates 4 GCA Chapter 10, Section 10112 C and D, thereby infringing on the rights of management to manage. By having this person being a voting member, they will not only vote at the board, but they will also be involved in the interviewing, hiring, terminating, and evaluation of the superintendent. And though they are not specifically involved in the adverse action process, as after it leaves the superintendent's office, it goes to the Civil Service Commission. Imagine the adverse action when the union member fills out the superintendent's evaluation. From 4 GCA Chapter 10 with respect to Section 11012, court decisions. 1. Section 11012 gives the government wide powers of supervision over the education system and its employees, which it cannot delegate away and make subject to the wishes of the teachers' union. By allowing the teachers' union to vote at the Guam Education Board, that is exactly what we are doing here. By allowing the bargaining unit to have a voting position would also compromise 5 GCA Chapter 8, the Open Government Law. B, notwithstanding any other provision of law, a public agency may hold executive session with its staff to consider matters with the scope of the Public Employee Management Relations Act. As I said, I sat on the Board of Trustees at the Guam Community College as the faculty union representative advisor. I was allowed to attend executive session. And I made it a caveat before I even went to one, that any time they were going to discuss the agreement, the union agreement, or personnel matters, I was leaving. I was walking out. It's not my business. It's management's business. And it spells that out in 4 GCA very, very clearly. Management's right to hire, terminate, assign its employees. By allowing the bargaining unit to have a vote at the board in how that is done. And how do they get the vote? Who approves the budget? And what's in the budget of DOE? By name, every single employee at every single school. And I remember specifically asking questions about why we have 8 school aides at a school with 400 kids and only 4 at a school with 1,600 kids, meaning I have input to the assignment of members of DOE. The other point I want to make before I conclude is that I forgot. I'll be a son of a gun. I forgot. I'll get to it. Okay. Note that union representation on the UOG Board of Regents and the GCC Board of Trustees is that of an advisor. and not privy to executive session. In considering the inclusion of the bargaining unit, one should be reminded of the past problems that GFT has had with its elections. In October of 2011, the U.S. Department of Labor issued the GFT a letter in reference to, and I've attached the letter, to extending the time in which the Secretary of Labor could file suit against the GFT under Section 402 LMRDA 29 U.S.C. Section 428, and subsequently monitored. A U.S. DOL person was here on island, monitored the following GFT election to ensure there were no improprieties as those that were alleged. Why do I bring this up? We're going to allow for the bargaining unit, which is a part of the GFT, to appoint someone to vote on a board that is in conflict with a contract that they also vote on. Subsequently, also as part of that, that action, the GFT delegates to the AFT National Convention that year had their votes sequestered because of improprieties with how they got election. I don't ever want to hear anyone ever say that I am anti-union. I'm not. I've included with you, and I've also given you the union facts. My problem, and what I'm opposed to primarily, in addition to what I've already said, is that organizations that are there to assist its members that fail in their obligation to which they are entrusted. Since 2008 through 2015, the GFT has taken in some $8.59 million in dues and membership income, while membership has declined some 35%. And at the same time, income per member dues paid has increased 13%. And I have given you the website, it's in my testimony, where you can fact check that comment. The failure is one of the main contributing factors why that led to the UOG and GCC faculty departure from the GFT and forming their own locals. Finally, my dear senators, it's said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I ask you, please not take this road. And if you should, I ask you to delay any action until after the November 6th election and until the new governor takes office. In other words, leave this for the 35th legislature. Me.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. Now we'll hear from Mr. Koss.
Thank you, Senators. Thank you, Senator San Agustin, for introducing this bill. I'm here today on behalf of the Guam Federation of Teachers and myself, as well as our representative who sits on the board. There is a board meeting this afternoon, I understand, and there are a number of people who wanted to be here today to testify in favor of this bill. Unfortunately, they're unable to do so, and I was asked to do this last minute. I'd like to start out by pointing out that Mr. Barry Mead does have a history with the Guam Federation of Teachers. We admit that. However, currently at this time, he has no affiliation with the GFT union. His views and opinions that he expressed here today are strictly his own and not that of the union. With respect to representing bargaining unit members, the Guam Federation of Teachers represents 100% of the teachers in DOE. All are bargaining unit members. GFT has 51% approximately who are dues-paying members, or roughly half who pay dues. Let's see. Mr. Mead talked about the board may not waive its rights and duties and confer them to the union. That specific citation from the district court that he's referencing pertains to negotiating a waive.
Mr. Mead, this is not Mr. Mead. This is Mr. Mead. Hold on, Mr. Mead. This is not your hearing. You spoke. Mr. Koss will speak. We'll ask you a question and you may comment later. But this is not for you to just interrupt, okay? Show some respect, everybody else. Mr. Mead, relax, okay? Thank you.
Again, the reference from the court to negotiating away their rights and duties set forward by law. Today we're proposing to implement law, so I fail to see any relevance to that case to the reason we're here today. Not so long ago, some appointed members of the Guam Education Board suspended the Superintendent of Education. And subsequently, in my opinion...
Mr. Cos, I don't want you to be challenging Mr. Mead's statement. Okay, we'll just restrict your conversation just to the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So not so long ago, some appointed members of the Guam Education Board suspended the Superintendent of Education, and in my opinion, attempted a hostile takeover and a power grab at the DOE. I was employed in the position of DOE EMRO at that time. My desk was positioned just 3 feet away from the door for the board, the board's office. As EMRO, my job description included conducting investigations to allegations of malfeasance in DOE. As the board aired allegations against the superintendent, I was able to provide the school board and the GEB with factual reports refuting those allegations. It did not, in my opinion, take long for the board to realize that they needed me out of the way if they were going to succeed in occupying the highest paid positions in the DOE. In my opinion, the entire debacle was a conspiracy orchestrated from the onset by appointed members. This experience made it crystal clear to me, appointed boards are political vessels ripe for maneuvers by the appointing authority, and his appointed members are not necessarily acting in the public interest or the interest of education. Following that experience, I am now a firm proponent for the elective process for selecting school board members. Although the elective process is no guarantee against corruption, it certainly makes that process less likely to occur and more difficult to accomplish. Therefore, I fully support a democratic process that will prompt citizens to take greater interest in their schools, strive to shield education from politics and personal agendas that allow board members to act independently and in the best interest of education. That will put accountability back into the hands of the common man and the voting public. I also realize that these proposed changes to the board will not cause all the problems DOE is facing to go away. We will still have to deal with the issues of finance and facilities. But the bill proposes to take a step in the right direction, and it will help ensure that decisions of the board are arrived at after proper considerations, and not for some agenda that may not be in the public interest. Further, for the same reasons I mentioned above, I strongly support and favor the portion of the bill that provides the employee representative and student representative with a vote on the board. Their involvement is based on legitimate concerns for education, not politics and not personal gain. I'm confident that when the hearts and the heads of the board members share a common goal of educating our children and throw their personal and political agendas out the window, DOE can achieve far more than just adequate education. On behalf of the official position of the Guam Federation of Teachers, the President of the Guam Federation of Teachers and its representative on the board, and myself, we offer our full support for Bill 352-34. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cos. Mr. Densangan, before you start, Mayor Rudy, please join us on the table because I have your name. Sit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaker Terlaje, Senator Castro, good afternoon to all of you. Mr. Chairman, I commend you for working so hard to introduce so many bills to help our government and our island. And yes, I agree with the non-voting members to be voting member. But I oppose that the 3 appointees of MAGAʹLÅHI GUÅHAN be removed and increase the term from 2 to 4 years. Well, the MAGAʹLÅHI, or the governor of Guam, Mr. Chairman, as prescribed by Section 1422, titled Organic Act of Guam, shall have the responsible and control of all government agency, department, bureau, and instrumentalities of the government of Guam. He may even grant pardons, reprieves, remit fines, forfeitures committed against the local law. That's why the Congress made him so powerful. And we cannot take out that authority from the governor. In reality, he's the one in charge of all government agency, whether it is autonomous or not. If there's something wrong with DOE or GMH, that's his problem. And history has proven that there's no two-term governor that became successful when he decided to seek a third term, or two-term governor that became successful when he decided to seek a higher office. At one time, years ago, President Lincoln was asked by the reporter, how you test the character of a person? He said right away, elect him to office. Give him position. That's how you test the character of a person. And that will reflect the leadership of the governor in supervising all the government agency. To me, the creation of elected board member and CCU are inorganic because they took away the responsibility and control of the governor. Now, I agree with Mr. Meade that the board member right now should not be increased to 4 years because of the timing. What we need to address is why we cannot entice or attract candidates to the board member of education. That's what we need to address. I would guess maybe because of the 150 signatures nominating petition, when the other non-partisan, the OPA, CCU, and others does not require to submit 150 nominating petition. I will not discuss further, Mr. Chairman, because it's in the court right now. And then the second one is the salary. When I was a board member 20 years ago, as a write-in candidate, because nobody would like to run for board member, only 3 ran for elected board member by that time. So 3 of us ran as a write-in. I mean to say 10 of us. And I was lucky to win, even though my name is hard to spell. Moving forward, the salary also could be a factor because right now they're getting $500 compared to CCU, $1,000, OPA $110,000, and the AG $100,000+. So maybe something that we need to discuss or think about. That's why we cannot attract many candidates for board members of education, and this is the largest agency in Guam, Mr. Chairman. And also, yes, I would like to board member to stay within that 2 years length of term, because this will open to new candidate that would infuse new ideas, new energy. In fact, I was surprised that OPA was increased to 4 years length of term. Before it's only 2 years. It should be revert to 2 years. And all other board members should be, including CCU, is also getting 4 years length of term. It should all be revert to 2 years, so there should be new candidates every 2 years. You know, what are we paying them for? For the increase always of power and water? So that's why we need new candidates. And the point here is, you, the legislator, are not only creating law, but you are the main board members of all the agency and the executive branch, because you are the one enacting the law. Now, how do you protect your authority? You will create law, and then you will let the executive agency administer that law by them creating regulation, rules, and policy. That's why in the mainland, this is an oversight commentary from National Conference of State Legislature. In the mainland, although state legislatures have delegated that authority to executive agency, they have carefully protected their authority to review and in most instances approve administrative rules to ensure that they comply with statutory authority and legislative intent. Because sometimes you will enact law and then they will create policy that is not consistent with the law or with the legislative intent. Just like the procurement department. GPA and GSA will impose, for example, delivery date required is 30 days. And then one vendor will mark down 45 days delivery. The other, even though his bid is 20,000 lower, GSA or GPA will disqualify all the vendors that does not comply with their imposed delivery date and award it to the highest bidder. So even though there's no adverse effect to the government of Guam that you will lose money, that is an emergency. You see? And then, even though there's a law that if it's, your bid is 25,000, you don't have to require bid ban. But the judiciary, they will base it on their threshold estimate on the bid. If their bid is 50,000 and my bid only is 20,000, they will still require me to submit a bid ban because they said, this is based on our estimate, on the threshold. Our estimate here is 30,000. See, that's one of the problems, Mr. Chairman. They are creating their own policy. But some agency, they don't impose delivery date. And they will put down the delivery date offered by the vendor. And then some agency also will honor, if my bid is less than 25,000 or 25,000, I don't have to submit a bid ban. And it will help a lot of small business owner. Because in the military, even though how big is your bid in the supply, they don't require the bid ban. That's why it's very important that the legislature needs to be active in not only in formulating policy, but also reviewing the administrative rules, regulation, and policy that is created by its department. And that's where, you'll be very busy like a bee, and you'll be helping really our island and our government. You'll be, especially our people, because you'll be correcting a lot of mistakes made by the agency that are unintended. Sometimes they don't know that they are not complying with the law, and they need also your guidance. And it can be, diplomatically be addressed by just calling a meeting with them or an oversight hearing, or not even oversight hearing, or maybe sending a memo that, hey, these rules and regulation does not comply with the law. And
okay.
That's why you have to amend it. And if they refuse, then you create a law that will specifically address that concern. There's nothing that they can do. But in the mainland, Mr. Chairman, they have the authority to amend the state legislature authority to amend, but also the veto rules.
Okay. Do you have anything further for this bill, Mr. Sit?
Excuse me?
You have anything further on the bill?
Any more comment?
On the bill?
Yeah, yes.
Let's wrap it up now, okay?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and I just like another concern, Mr. Chairman, is just like in taxation, just like 7 cashiers. There's only one cashier specifically for 5 transactions. Sometimes I have to go there for 12 transactions. I have to line up 3 times.
On the bill, we're talking about
that's related to the bill.
I don't need to know the examples at revenue and tax and anywhere else. We're talking about the Board of Education.
Okay.
Okay, so if you can be more specific, I appreciate it, sir.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I oppose this bill on the 2 grounds because just like what Mr. Meade said, it is a wrong timing. It's like giving a gift to the poor candidates for board member of education. They're the only candidate. And we need 6 for elected board member. So they're already sure winner. Now you're giving them a gift to extend their term to 4 years instead of 2. You know, that's why I oppose this bill. And you cannot, it's in organic, against the Organic Act of Guam to take out that authority, that governor of Guam authority. Let him make mistake. That's the case. All agencies should run in the direction with what the governor wants. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mendiola, sir. I know you're speaking on as a self, but you are the chairman of the Board of Education.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that.
No problem.
But at this time, if it's all right, I'd like to yield to the Honorable Mayor of GIGO if you would like to.
I'll let you speak first. We follow in order.
Okay, I just,
Don't worry, he's my mayor from GIGO, so he'll get a chance
understood,
to speak.
sir. I just wanted to recognize the mayor if you wanted to go before me. Honorable Senator Jesus Masi, Senator Castro, Speaker Talahi, Senator Bisco-Lee. I wanted to come before you folks to kind of talk about my personal experience. Mr. Castro here, he probably can attest to the experience I went to when I was a student at the University of Guam. Mr. Castro was a special assistant to the Board of Regents. During my tenure as the student regent, elected by the student population of the University of Guam, unfortunately, it was a position that I was a voting member on the board. And during that time, the board made a decision. We voted, and unfortunately, the powers that be did not like the vote, and subsequently, we were sued by the Attorney General of Guam. So imagine this for a moment: a student at the University of Guam. I wasn't in my career. I didn't have any money. I was on financial aid. And a process server from the Attorney General's office hunted me down in my class. And I said, this is board activity. Can you forward it to our legal counsel? And the guy said, no, I have to serve you your papers. I said, well, you have to wait until after my class. Waited until after my class. The guy sat there for about an hour and 20 minutes. I still refused to sign that documentation because at that time, that was not my priority. I was a student. And so I understand the intent of the bill to get folks to participate, and I appreciate that because I know the importance of the vote. But there also comes certain liabilities with that power that's bestowed upon a student. And my concern is, with the students. I feel that perhaps maybe you may want to look at other jurisdictions that maybe have voting. I don't know. But I just know it's going to be very stressful. And for a student, I'm not sure whether that student will have the capacity. I know there's set terms in there, 2.5 GPA. Most of the kids that are serving in the Island Board of Governing Students, they're representative body. And of course, they get selected. And, that was one of the challenges I faced as a student. And honestly speaking, I've applied for certain jobs away from Island. And when they search my name, that pops up. And I said, Mr. Mendiola, can you explain this lawsuit? Why did you get sued? And I don't know if a student's willing to go through that. I went through it. So I know from personal experiences that that's the potential. And of course, with the lawsuit that just happened recently that we cleared up, anybody can get sued. We live in a litigious society where individuals can sue. And I know that the union is here. I know that if this union member becomes a voting member and the union decides to say, hey, you guys are voted against the interest bargaining unit, would that union member be part of that lawsuit? Or would that person be exempted from that lawsuit? So I think there's a lot of ambiguity and there's a lot of issues that needs to kind of be addressed. I'm neither here nor there. I think I appreciate the discussion because it raises a lot of issues that we are doing on the board. So now, if you allow me to put my hat on as the chairman of the board, one of the things that has allowed me to, I think, become an effective board member is training. I had this opportunity serving at the University of Guam, understanding our roles, our responsibilities, being working on policy, and to being a governing board rather than micromanaging. There's only one employee, and that's the superintendent of education. If you look at the structure of the University of Guam, if you look at that model, they have a region nominating council where they vet their stakeholders within the organization that vet these folks, and then they ask these folks to go through the process and get appointed by the governor. And so I understand the Organic Act authority of confirmation and the checks and balances within the system. So for me, I just wanted you to take into consideration those two issues. Number one, with the student issue. Number two, if the GFT voting member was on that, what type of liability would that GFT member be on? I know that there are some questions about a current member on the board, but I can reassure you folks that the way we have the board structure now, how items are put on the agenda for discussion, we've never left out the GFT, we've never left out the Mayor's Council, we've never left out the student body. Everybody has a stake. And at the discretion of the chairperson, they can invite these folks to stay in for executive session. And this is where we discuss personnel matters and issues as such. So just through my experience, sir, I know on the board, I think that's why I think it's important to invest in proper training as people become board members. I think it's important for us to continue to follow and look at what's going on nationally. We live on an island where we're modeled after the American education system, and it's changing rapidly. And we as board members have to be up to speed on a lot of the issues regarding disabilities, regarding federal programs, Title IX issues. And that's why I am a big proponent and supporter when there's opportunities for us to go out there or have people come in and talk to how to be board members, to be effective board members. I think that's key, that's important. And I think the issue really is trust. You know, how do you build that trust? How do you build that? What is your messaging that you want to put out there into the community? Well, you know, I firmly believe that, you know, we have a good team that is working really well to address a lot of the issues that have been long in existence. We've done a lot of things to kind of address some of the challenges. We actually, one of our board members is reviewing the personnel rules and regulations manual, and we're gonna start cleaning these things up. And may I suggest, I kind of like the way the University of Guam has it set up where they have staggered terms. So as people go, there's a rotation of people, so there's continuity, and you have historical knowledge of how certain things come through. So maybe that may be another idea you guys may want to consider with respect to the bill, that you know, that is staggered terms, one to serve 2, then another 4, and then as they go out, just so that there's some continuity. I tell you, when I first came on the board, it was kind of challenging for me because I had to learn quick. And I always lean to the folks that have been there a lot longer than I have, share me what was the historical perspective as to why this policy was crafted or how it was drafted. And as they explained it to me at the time, this is how it goes, this is how we went through the process. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do on the board, and I hope that you know, the candidates that come, and I was really surprised that there was only 4 people that actually filled out the application to become an elected board member. And believe me, I felt like I was going to run like a senator because you had to get and you had to do your financials, you had to do all these different things. And then on top of that, I had to pay my court costs, clearances and all that stuff. So it cost me a little bit of money, but you know, I'm willing, I'm committed to serve. So I just hope that, you know, whatever comes off this bill, that you take those things into consideration, because I think, especially for the students, I think that needs to be well thought out, because the potential for that amount of pressure on a student could be and these guys are in their junior, senior year, they should be focusing on graduation and applying for a good university or going to school to further their education. And so with that, I conclude my oral testimony. Sidus Masi for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Mendiola. My mayor from Jigo, Mayor Rudy.
Good afternoon, Honorable Senator Bisco Lee, Senator Will Castro, Honorable Senator Teresa Terlahi, and Chairman Senator Joseph Agustin from Jigo. You know, I thought it was easy, you know, to just come up here and say thank you very much for wanting to make the Mayor's Council representative on Department of Education a voting member. You know, I didn't want to talk about this, but you know, when you go to the Department of Education to represent 19 mayors and 7 vice mayors and not being a voting member, and I know that Mr. Mark Mendiola, Robert Crisostomo, and Mr. McNitch mean well, and I also want to say that they're doing a fantastic job to represent the Department of Education, you know, and they have the students' interests always in mind. And I don't understand, you know, why it would change, but I guess you guys know, you know, the reasons why you have to do this. And another thing, I wanna agree with Mark about making the student representative iBox be a voting member. That's a lot of responsibility. You know, I've been there for almost 2 years and I still don't understand what's going on up there. And also, you know, this is really a good thing, but we have to think about things such as, you know, making the mayor's council representative only 1 year, because like I've said, I've been there representing the mayor's council for about 2 years and I still don't understand what's going on. So it takes time for us to really understand what's going on in the Department of Education to be an effective member. And you know, saying all that, it's really, and I don't know how to say this, but you know, the elected, the people that are elected by the MAGAʹLÅHI, Guam, are doing such a fantastic job up there, and you know, they do look after the interests of the kids. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Senators, do you have any questions for the panel? Vice Speaker? Acting Speaker?
I just want to confirm, Mr. Mendiola, are you in support of this bill then or not?
You know, that's a great question. I like that people participate in the process. I just don't know how to answer that for me personally, because I think, you know, when you have different stakeholders looking at it from different angles, then you can really formulate policy that really encompasses all the stakeholders. I just think that the bill needs to be tweaked a little bit more in terms of, you know, what's asked of these individuals that are going to be voting members on the board. And so, and clarification as to the limitations in which they can participate. I mean, I know that if you feel you're conflicted out on a certain issue or policy, you can say, I conflict myself out, I don't want to vote. But once the board takes action and it passes, then it becomes the whole entire board. My only thing is then what is the liability for each of the individual board members should someone decide that they were wrong or their civil rights was violated for one reason or the other. And then the personnel rules and regulations. So I sat at the University of Guam, and I know I sat as a student looking at tenure applications and getting really involved. And that's the reason why I think board training is very important, and going through, I know right now currently in law we go through ethics training and all this stuff, but I think it's above and beyond that in terms of policy and governance. And I think that's one of the reasons why I study, I read, I ask people who are smarter than me as to, you know, how do we effectuate policy. But I look at the different models. I think there's just more we can look at and kind of make it better. But in terms of the mayor's input, the GFT, currently the way it is, I feel very comfortable that they're represented well and they're able to bring things to the board that we can hash out, whether it be policy. And the GFT, we've had a great working relationship since I've come on board, where they're able to push a lot of issues that our teachers are facing and some of the challenges they're facing. And so, like I said, I want to remain neutral at this point, and hopefully when the bill gets scrubbed and hopefully our testimony taken into consideration, there'll be some changes.
All right, can you also clarify for the record, are you an appointed member or an elected member right now?
Yes, I am an appointed member, and I decided, and I'm good for 1 more year, but I decided that I wanted to seek the elected position on the board.
Oh, so you're running for a position now?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I want to thank all of you for your testimony. I appreciate each one's different perspective. And Mayor, if you don't mind, may I ask you one question too? So as the mayor representative, do you think there was a time, could you give us an example maybe of when you thought a vote would have made a difference if you had a vote, as opposed to what they've been testifying, that you've been able to have an impact on the board's decisions in the current status?
You know, I don't want to make a comment on, about that, because like I said, I never, there's a lot of times when I don't understand what they're talking about, because they don't allow us to go into executive session and stuff like that. But I do support this bill, Bill 352-34. I do support it, and I hope that you consider what I've said and maybe tweak it a little, But I think you guys are going in the right direction.
Okay, so there's several parts of the bill, and I'm hearing, different things on each different part. So there's a term limit, there's the staggering term that's not in the bill, but it might be, and then there's the number of members overall, they will all be elected members after this, that except for those who come from different organizations, such as the union member, the IBOC member, and the mayors, right? So I just think I would like to ask each of you, what do you think of each of those, each part of this bill? Because I kind of think it's getting the overall, perhaps, but then your testimony sometimes
may I just speak to in terms of the voting
well,
that
I'm going to leave it to the chair to get, they all seem to want to comment. I'll leave it to the chair. Yeah.
It's up to you. Can I just make one quick point?
One.
Okay.
Senator Castro, you have any questions you want to ask? We're going to go down with all the senators first, because I know that each one of you want to comment, and I see where the mayor's coming from already. I see where GFT is coming from, and I see exactly where Mr. Mee's coming from. But I'm going to have my colleagues first be able to ask questions.
I'm curious as to your opinion in terms of the value of an appointed member on a board that has a mix of memberships, when attempting to, let's say, align the priorities of the administration as established maybe in their blueprint. I mean, notwithstanding who the governor is, do you see value in an appointee being able to participate in that dialogue? And is it necessary to preserve the seat for an appointed member of the board by the governor?
One of the things that I'm sitting also as the chair of Budget and Finance Committee, and oftentimes I've come to the legislature, and oftentimes I say, go to the governor's office. When I got appointed and I went through the confirmation hearing, I reassured the board member, the senators, that my true intent is really to work to try and help the Department of Education. I think I've done that, and I think that in this position as an appointed member, one thing about our colleagues that we all had an understanding, and that's why that board retreat was very important, that every vote counts, and we're all on equal footing as board members, whether you're appointed or elected. When you vote, you got to vote your conscience, vote what's in front of you, and you got to live with that decision, and I firmly believe in that. And with whatever data or information is in front of me, absolutely. But when we're working, as Mr. Mead said, we're the largest government agency. There's about 4,000 employees within the Department of Education, 31,000 students that are depending on us to make sound judgment and sound policies. I think when everybody works together, and I think part of the process is the confirmation for the legislature to also have that. I've had numerous conversations with the former speaker regarding our budget, met with Mr. Tamata, of course, Senator San Agustin and his staff come to our board meetings, and you've attended a couple of our board meetings. So I honestly appreciate the opportunity to serve, and I think having that relationship with the front office, as they say, the front office is equally important, because we're one government at the end of the day. And if I have to go to the front office and advocate and say our position as to why we're in this position with the government, and of course the legislature is the appropriating body of our budget, And, of course, that cash flow is managed by the Department of Administration. Of course, we just need to know. And that's why the department, every time we come down there, we're just asking for flexibility. We understand that the government is facing difficult times, but I think we've been at the forefront in leading a lot of the effort to live within our means and to kind of push forward. So there's a lot of things, but to answer your question, sir, I've been elected before and I've been appointed before, and so to me, it's really up to the individual, and I take my role very seriously. And so I know members on our board that are appointed by the governor also take their roles very seriously. And so we just continually educate ourselves and try to continuously improve. So with that, I'll leave it up to the wisdom of the legislature. But at this point, I don't think it's broken. I think we just need to, look at what's being proposed here and see if it's worth a shot to, get the best people in there so that we can create sound policy for the Department of Education.
Senator Lee, ma'am.
Gentlemen, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Mr. Meade, Mr. Koss. Thank you to Mr. Linsangen, who's left us, but also to the board chair, Mr. Mendiola, and Mayor. Thank you so much for being here and for kind of sharing with us your thoughts about this very important part of our community. I think I'm hearing from several of you that access is an issue. So the idea that in order for candidates to come forward and be to get their names on the ballot, there's that kind of artificial obstacle that's being put forward with regard to petitions and getting signatures. There was a suggestion made to us in a written statement that the court and police clearances are also, just kind of a waste of time. And one suggestion that was made is that folks who are candidates for the Board of Education might just come in and make a sworn declaration under penalty of perjury. And so I wanted to ask each of you what your thoughts are about if we go in and change that section of the code. What are your thoughts about that? Mr. Meade? So instead of requiring the signatures and requiring the police and court clearances, making a sworn declaration instead.
I think that the process of filing their things with the election commission would be spot on by, I paid the same fees Mr. Mendiola paid when you get the court clearances. And we all should remember years ago we had a person that was elected to the board that should have never been on the ballot. So I think the court clearances and police clearances should still be required, because remember again, these are folks that will be dealing with our children.
I think one of the concerns...
So keeping that as part of the application process,
is okay,
having it go through the GEC, since they're not getting a petition, I don't know if it would be necessary to do a financial statement, but a conflict of interest statement would be really extreme. And when you go to that level and say, oh, conflict of interest, well, if you're paid by the union, how do you get to be also on the Board of Education and vote for the contract by which you get the money is derived that pays you?
Okay.
That's my offense to that. And like I said, the union representatives at the Guam Community College and at the Board of Trustees do not vote. They're representatives of their union, just like as there is at the Education Board today. That person represents, they sit at the table, they represent the union. They're given, as Mr. Mendiola has said, the opportunity to present information. I supplied lots of information. I got lots of things that I thought they should do, motions, made. And a lot of my ideas
even without the voting
were used.
Okay.
Because the information is valuable. The same thing with the mayors.
Thank you.
But at the same time, you're really setting up those folks to have some serious problems with the conflicts of, especially when you're negotiating a contract. It's nothing to do, Mr. Koss is right. I've had a lot of issues with the GFT. I founded with the support of 100% of all the faculty at GCC voting to withdraw from the GFT, because we just could no longer agree with the manner in which it was being run.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Mead.
Koss is correct.
Sorry, Mr.
By
Mead, I
law-
also want to hear from the rest of
Okay.
the panel. I apologize.
Well,
Mr. Koss,
thought I'd get my shot.
so with regard to no longer requiring the need for signatures and petitions, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've never actually run for the school board or for any elected position, so I'm not real familiar with it. Board members have, I would say, limited, well, they do have access to the schools and direct access to the students, is that right? You do out to the schools and pay visits. So anytime we've got an individual who has direct contact with students, I think we need to be very certain that they're an appropriate individual for that type of thing.
I think the suggestion was that police and court clearances could be waived because they only cover local actions. And so a sworn declaration under penalty of perjury might be a more...
The Attorney General's office has the ability of doing FBI background checks. Working at DOE, I was very familiar with that, and that there were some discussions about conducting those sorts of checks for applicants. Quite frankly, I think that is the sort of thing that we might want to consider even for board members. Or anyone who's going to have, again, direct contact with students.
Right.
I don't think it's unreasonable if it's expensive. Maybe the government could reimburse those who are elected to office for those costs. I don't know. You know, there might be some sort of offset made available to them.
Okay, thank you very much. Chairman Mendiola?
Yeah, I know. I only go to the schools when I'm invited, and I think that's what you know, the standard operating procedure is. We get an invitation to come in, but you know, in terms of contact with the students, of course, I think safety is paramount. I went through this process from being appointed to being elected, and when you're appointed, you don't go through much of that screening. You get vetted, you fill all that stuff out, but with the elected position, it's a lot of paperwork. You gotta get the 150 signatures, you know, things of that nature, and so. I think it's.
Do you think that presents a barrier?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of, especially for folks that are not familiar with it. I mean, it was my first run at it, so it was kind of, I got a little bit frustrated, but I was able to work through it. I just said, why am I filling out all these things, you know? Is it really necessary? But they wanted to know my financial, they wanted to know my bank accounts, they want to know all these different things, and I just thought, you know, I'm trying to serve on the board, I'm trying to put forth, and then of course, like you said, the resources that you have to put in, of course, but you have to want to do it. And if you're willing to do it, then you would jump through that, you know, those hoops. But I think it's worth something considering, maybe easing off in terms of other areas. But I think the background checks are important, how we do it, whether through the Attorney General's office or through police clearances. One way or the other, we just got to make sure that the people that are in this position have certain, you know, credibility, and they're not wanted by the justice system.
Right. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair. Mr. Mayor? Your thoughts about the petition?
No, I don't have anything to say about that.
Okay.
But, you know, I'm wondering why, and I don't know if I can ask this question, what reason do you have to remove the 3 appointees from the MAGAʹLÅHI? You know, and I don't want an answer, but I just want to tell you that it's the same whether they're voted in during the election, it's still politics. And I think that it's safer to have the MAGAʹLOHI appoint them because they're, you know, they know the people that they're appointing. And they know that they're capable of handling what they're going to be facing as Department of Education representative. And I'm going to repeat myself, the 3 appointees from the governor, and I don't care what governor appointed them, they're doing a fantastic job. They really are.
Thank you,
Amen.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. One other thing that I did want to note is, and I'm hearing it from several of you, that you believe that the student members should be exempt from any litigation with the board. And I know we brought up the issue with Superintendent Fernandez and the suit, and that an IBOGS student might be kind of caught up in all of that, and that's something, and I know you had a personal experience, so I'm really grateful for you sharing that with us. And we'll continue to take a look at this. I think one of the issues also that I had in reviewing this bill was if you're decreasing the amount of members, then we might have a quorum issue. Yeah, sorry, if you want to speak to that.
You know, that's one thing I wanted to mention with the quorum issues. Of course, we have folks that travel, you know, family, and so we were able to adjust our policy. If you look at the Department of Education, we're one of the most transparent government agencies. We are on Facebook Live. Our things are uploaded. I know that in the recent article said that we were behind, but actually that thing was forwarded to them, but it was just didn't get booted up. But I know that we do our best to be as transparent as possible. And we created a policy where if a member is not able to make it because they are off island, that they were able to I mean, with the advent of technology and it's transparent, people are there, they're seeing the vote. And then, you know, all the board information, the board packet can get, by a push of a button, they'll have all the same information that's in front of me at the board meeting. So I think, you know, it would be potentially maybe become a quorum issue if folks are not. I think the department, though, is set up where we are able to provide opportunities for people to participate and have the information in front of them. So that's one of the concerns I also have is that, you know, it can potentially cause a quorum issue, quorum crisis, if you will, if, let's say, for example, if one person resigns from the board, you know, those potentials could arise.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chair, again, for the opportunity. Gentlemen, thank you very much for sharing your perspective with us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for attending. We've heard your comments. I have your written testimony. If this bill, as we take all your comments, and I will be getting input from my colleagues, and then we will tweak the bill and then relook it and see how it may work. And I'm not really going to answer your question, Mayor, but at the end of the day, if this bill doesn't move anywhere, whoever becomes governor will control the Board of Education in January. So just picture that. Okay, so if you wanted to know about why, I was on the board when that happened. The elected body did not have any control of anything. And I'm going to leave it at that. There's no one else to testify. And the committee will conclude the public hearing for bill number 352-34 COR. The committee will continue to receive testimony for the next few days, which will end on Friday. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. San Augustine at gmail.com. My office is located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tumuning, Guam, 96931. Sidus Marcy for your attendance and participation in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. Good evening.